Hello, everyone. My name is Rishika Porandla, and I'm the founder and director of Spacetime Archives, which is an educational outreach nonprofit aiming to provide unique STEM learning opportunities and resources to underserved youth. Spacetime Archives is currently running a project called And Then There Were 10, the testimonies of 10 women fighting for educational equity, which is an interview series highlighting the untold stories of 10 extraordinary women who are at the forefront of providing social justice in terms of education. On that note, let me introduce one of those women, Weonhee Shin. Weonhee Shin is the Executive Director of Asian American Voices for Education, and she's also a tireless advocate for educational equity for Asian Americans in Georgia and beyond. She values sharing the stories of historical Asian Americans excluded by educational curriculums and also modifying education to be more inclusive.
Good morning. Thank you for that introduction, Rishika. I feel like I don't belong in that top 10, so that's what an honor it is. Thank you. My name is Weonhee Shin. I am the founder of Asian American Voices for Education, and I'm currently the executive director of the organization. We were founded in 2021 in response to the rise of anti-hate crimes that we saw. And I'm also a mother of three. I went to public school in Virginia, K through 12, and seeing that my kids' education was the same as in representation in their classrooms and just the historical narratives that they were seeing, and seeing that in connection to the rise of hate crimes and how realizing that that's nothing new, that historically people of color, especially from Asia, have faced discrimination and racism and hate. And that had been going on for centuries, and that it was just another repetition made me want to do something. So following suit of different states, like Illinois was the first state to pass legislation requiring Asian American history. Many Asian Americans in Georgia felt the same, like, let's change the heart of things. Let's change our children's classrooms so that becomes a place where you learn all of our histories and the connection of our stories to one another so that we can all grow in empathy, so that our children know how to humanize their classmates, in hopes that in the future, that'll be a way to prevent hate crimes and these kind of events.
So thank you so much for joining us for this interview. And I wanted to mention that these around 15 questions that I'm going to ask have been submitted from students all across the nation. So we'll get to see exactly what people want to know about you. So our first question is, what inspired you to start or propel Asian American Voices for Education and focus on diversifying Georgia's educational standards?
Sure. Right around the time when there was COVID and anti-Asian hate crimes, there was that movement. So that was definitely it. And during COVID, we were all inside and we're reading a lot, right? I would stay up until like 2 and reading, and that's also when the surge of literature came out from Asian Americans, saying things and kind of labeling things and putting words to it. Even things like a model minority myth, right? A lot of things that I felt growing up, there were a lot of question marks and blanks, but in a way, I thought I must be the lunatic. This must not be exist. There was no wording for it. There was no affirmation, but seeing that all on media, helped me build confidence. And then we also saw that education system in Georgia, it hadn't really changed a lot. And in the US too, Asian Americans are the fastest growing racial group, as well as in Georgia, yet our children's classrooms were at a place that we're not giving power to any of these students. So a group of parents and educators actually gathered in 2021 and said, let's do something about this.
Was it a lot of parents that gathered together at first, or was it just a few and then just kind of spiraled from there?
Sure. Do you want the long version or the short version? What would you
You can do the
like?
long version.
Okay. And I think before I go there, then I'll have to tell you my story, why I did it. Because for me, it was also before Illinois passed legislation. Illinois is the first, state to pass legislation requiring certain histories. For me internally, I'm Korean American. I moved to Georgia. I grew up in Virginia, lived in Boston for a number of years, and I moved to the South. And I had a lot of, I think, trauma in the South of how I was raised. I grew up in rural Virginia, and coming to Georgia, though, I realized that there really wasn't a place for my Asian American, Korean American children. As in my first, he was in second grade at the time. He said, Amma, which is mom in Korean, he said, and Hindi. He said, Amma, how come I don't see any kids who look like me in the books that I read? And that made me think a little bit. So that's going on. And then I see there's, it was also during COVID, it was, there was Black Lives Matter movement really picked up. But a lot of the conversations were very black and white binary. And I thought as a Korean person, in my identity intersectionality as a cisgender Korean American child immigrant woman, what is my role? Because I'm not white. So how I approach this will be different. I'm not black, so how can I support this work? And it was an internal struggle for me. So what I realized through that process is that there's a lot of movements that die when it's not hot. And that didn't sit well with me because this is a reality and I didn't want to be an ally who just does it because it's cool and have a yard sign in my house. And so what I realized was if I learn history of all of us, because one history builds to the other, and I see how my story is related to everyone else's, then it becomes personal. And when something becomes personal, then it is a way to, then it is a lifelong thing. It's not just one time movement thing. So how is that related? So what I learned when I was learning my own history is the first time that we had something called undocumented immigration in the US was Chinese laborers. And guess what happened? This is in 1800s. They came from south of the border and they're political cartoons that have a wall built. So it became very relevant what was going on at that time with the Trump administration and the wall. So what my Latino, neighbors may be going through, or people who are trying to cross the border, and that's what people who looked like me went through in the 1800s. So it becomes very personal. And so when there was the Muslim ban too, I realized, oh my gosh, there was a ban of all Asian Americans from the 1800s until the mid 1900s. So including South Asian, Chinese, Korean, Japanese. So it's like when I saw the history repeats itself to marginalized people becomes personal, and I need to do something about it. And it's not just, although we provide the Asian American perspective, it has to be more. It's how is my history and your history, how are they related, and how did one lead to the other? Because then our children will become change makers. And that became this fire in us to say, hey, it's not just about content, but let's teach our kids first, you have value, your stories make sense, there's a reason why things are the way they are, and there's something you can do about it. You have a lot of power.
That's very inspiring just to see how you took such raw motivation, turned it into initiatives that could actually help people. How did you frame your very first initiative with the Asian American community that you had to actually change some of these curriculums?
Sure. So I had to get to know the established Asian American communities. So in the beginning, it's relationship building. And what I quickly realized is it's not a quick, fast movement. We have to think of this very long term because you can't change a whole system in a year or two, right? So, and you also have to build trust. So there's a fairly well-established older Asian American community, and there was an organization at the time who really brought all of us together because of the COVID hate crimes. And it was Pan-Asian, also multi-generational, and it was just a wonderful moment. And to talk to the elders also, and who are not, of different Asian groups, and talking about the importance of this. And they were all on the same page. In a way, I think tragedy of COVID kind of brought us together in a way. And just a lot of things that happened politically kind of brought us together because our realities and our struggles became very tangible at that moment. So we started having those conversations and working with them and just trying to see how do we want to do this and really respect where everybody was at that time.
So after that community was built, did you immediately start planning? Did you immediately start identifying crisis areas? Or did you talk to more people, hear more personal stories? How did you approach that?
So it's interesting. So several things happened. So 2021 in May, what happened was I approached one of the biggest Asian American, it is the only actually social activist Asian American group here in the South, Georgia, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Atlanta, because their counterpart in Illinois had a huge part in passing legislation. So I approached them early, maybe around March 2021, saying, hey, I see your counterpart doing this amazing thing. Will you guys do something like that in Georgia? And they said, you know what, Weonhee, we have so much going on. We have DACA, we have like so many other political things that we have to work on, gerrymandering, that we just don't have capacity. So I told him I'll do the legwork, but I need your guidance because I don't want this to be again, another yard sign thing and it dies. It has to be a long lasting work. So they said, okay, we'll guide you through the policies and things like that. So after that, in May, we had a town hall, and this was purely through social media in Georgia. Do people want this? And I recently found out through my children that Facebook is for older people, but that's what I use because that's all I know. And within like a few weeks, we had 160 people fill out a pretty comprehensive form saying, we want this. And they were 60% educators and 40% mostly parents. So we had a town hall in May. And so 2021, we really focused on research, like let's build relationship with the Asian American communities, but also people in education. What does Georgia PTA think? What do the educators in Georgia want? Who is part of the social studies world in Georgia? Who are the changers and makers? Who are the policy makers? Who are, all of that. And it was about building trust and relationship because you can't just sweep in and say, I'm going to change it and think that it's going to last. It won't. There are people who are dedicated to doing this for years. You have to build a partnership with them. And also building trust and relationship with education groups that are focused and primarily run by people of color. What we found out was there was no Asian American presence. So we started building trust and relationship and really working together in all of those communities. And that's what we had to really work on in 2021.
I was wondering, as like a follow-up question, when you organized this town hall and you started like truly having these conversations with the community, did you face any opposition or perspectives that didn't want some sort of change to be brought about?
Not from Asian Americans, but one issue that we did find was Asian American, it's not an issue that we are so diverse, right? Not only ethnically, but also belief-wise and politically. And we're all on different spectrums. So we found that certain things would be triggering to certain groups of people. And there was a lot of disconnect in that way and tension in that way. So that was, and it is still a struggle, but that is a healthy struggle. But that is challenging because not everyone is on the same path or on the same wavelength of how they want to do this work.
So I wanted to bring the conversation back to you and your personal beliefs. So I saw in a 2021 interview that you commented on a Georgia resolution that was passed in 2021. And I know you've already spoken about this, but I wanted to hear your perspective about 2 years later. So I'll just restate it. It stated that schools should not teach that an individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of his or her race or sex. Have your perspectives changed on this quote?
I mean, now we're living, and back in 2021, that had passed, and we didn't know what the results would be, right? And now we're living through that. So it's become very realistic for us as to what the effects of that resolution was. And since then, I'm really sad to say that recently that has led to things like book bans and things of that nature, and just a general air of teachers and school administrations being afraid, like, I don't know if I am allowed to teach it, or I don't know if I can. So there have been, not most, but in some cases, there have been some pushback and hesitancy to incorporate these histories because it's a very vague resolution. It's not specific. So it's really a matter of interpretation, which can be very dangerous too.
Very interesting. I also wanted to ask you about Avid's Heritage Learning Kits and
Yeah.
if that initiative was created just as like a plan that finally came through, or if it was incited by something that was occurring in like the political or social environment.
Sure. So your previous question about were there any opposition when we first started? So what we did, we wanted to find out what do normally people think, who are not Asian American. about us. And the reaction we got was, I thought you guys were white until COVID. Or one teacher organization said, no one will care about that. No one will care about Asian American history. So that was the reaction that we got from some people and groups, right? So it was as if, and one actor was actually interviewed, a Korean American actor, in one of the articles, and he said, it's like no one really cares about us. We're the ones screaming, and people are saying, whatever, And that's kind of how it was. So with Heritage Month Kit, the desire was some of the Asian American parents said, I want to volunteer in my kid's classroom, but I don't know how. I didn't grow up with that. My parents, they were typically immigrant parents or they were immigrant parents themselves. I didn't grow up with that, seeing a culture of school engagement. And I don't know Asian American history. I was never taught it. So I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. And May, as you may know, is Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So we thought, what a great opportunity to provide really well created and thoughtfully created material for parents to go into their kids' classroom and volunteer. First of all, it really does give power to parents, and hopefully it'll begin this relationship of involvement. But secondly, it also leaves the teacher, right? May is the end of the school year. It's something that they can do. And I've seen that in my children's classroom where parents will go in and volunteer for like Hanukkah or something like that and to educate the kids. So that's where the idea came from.
So did the Heritage Kids start at one school and they just expanded, or did you have to put in a lot of work to get them to have the reach that they have now?
So we had a goal of 100 classrooms in Georgia. It was a lot of work. So we wanted to make sure it's well done, that it's not just an activity, right? So the first stage was I drafted kind of like a skit for parents or something a script that they can read the project, and it included a craft, books to read, as well as a classroom coloring page of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, like historical figures and current figures, as well as a map of the world. And so what it detailed was, in the beginning, parents will talk about what is heritage? Where is Asia? Did you know half of the world's population is actually originates from Asia? To really push the idea that people think Asia, there's this one picture in their mind. Asia is so diverse. You can't limit more than half of the world's population in one stereotype. It just doesn't make sense to bring that to light to the children and hopefully to the teachers too, when they're listening. And also, what is heritage? And it has students talk about, what is your heritage? Everyone has a heritage. It's not just for certain people. And all of our heritage, unless it's from indigenous communities here in America, are from somewhere else. So we talk about that too, so that it normalizes all of us. You're not a foreigner. Like, not only certain groups of people are foreigners. So it's very deep concepts that we simplify for children. And then we dive into, different themes. We had courage and resilience. I'm like, what was the theme? Courage and resilience as a theme. Because we don't want to just talk about this story of struggle, but the power that came out of it. So there are certain figures that we highlighted and books. So the first step was we drafted this idea. Second stage was we recruited teachers, classroom teachers who took some of our training before, to look over it and to ensure that it is classroom and age appropriate, because we want to involve the teachers too. And then we had actually an expert who does this in pedagogy, an education expert, and also an Asian American history, social studies advocate, come in and make sure that it is relevant, it is culturally relevant, and that it is good and that it's solid. So it was multi-process. And then we hired an artist, a local artist, to design the poster for us. So there were many, many parts into it. And it took us a good 3 months to organize. And high school students organized together actually to create posters for local high schools and middle schools. So it was a very long and tedious effort. I would say I stayed up until 2 a.m. for 2 months getting this done and recruiting people to do it.
Were you
Yeah.
able to see evolution and progress in students' cultural understanding as a result of the kits? Was it an immediate change, or did you see it like progress over time? Like, wow, these students actually understand our culture now.
So it happened in May, and out of 100, we had 100 goal of 100 classrooms. We reached over 300 classrooms. And our kit, so the one that we created, the grown-ups created, were the K through 5, and the middle school, high school students created for the middle school and high school. So I would say it's too soon to show that effect, but the immediate reactions we had were students who are of Asian descent so excited to see it. And one student, my son actually, it was in his classroom, his teacher led it. I decided, and he said, when his teacher showed the kid, he said those two girls of Asian descent were ecstatic. He's never seen them so excited before because their reality becomes real. But I think that what I'm most excited about is also that teachers said, I didn't know any of this. I want to know more because they are going to make lasting change. They have the biggest reach of students. So they will start implementing within their classrooms.
I'm glad to see that such a beautiful initiative is having such a true impact in educational curriculums. I was wondering because Avid was like contained to such a small area before and now has expanded. You probably work with new people every week. I was
Mhm.
wondering how exactly you navigate different language barriers, if you have them, ethnic expressions, making sure that everyone is represented and you're sensitive and considerate to all groups. How do you approach that?
I think that's a great question because more than just ethnic and language barriers too, there's this um, also political views, right? So how do we want to do this, and what's the approach and the tone that we want to take? I would say for in the beginning, we had to go for the low hanging fruit. We found that the majority of the people interested in our work were typically fluent English speaking women between the ages of 35 and 44, very specific, pretty much moms. You know, moms who want things to be different. Those are the people most active. So those are the people we have to engage the most at first, right? But the next thing that we realize is a lot of immigrant families who are not native speakers typically identify as their identity in the culture of their origin or the country of their origin, not as an American. So that whole Asian American history doesn't seem very relevant to them. But it became this educational thing where we're still working on it, actually. Is the question that we have is how do we start approaching them saying, this affects your family because it affects your child, and what is your child's identity? Because your child being raised in America will have a very different identity from you. And this will be very directly related to their educational experience. We also found that in certain Asian American groups, it's very different. Like one group, the high school graduation rate, I believe, was like 30%. So it's very different, right? So their focuses are more on tutoring and things of that nature. So how we approach that group will be very different from, let's say, a second, third gen Asian American community that has a higher socioeconomic status. So it's been a juggle, to say the least, but for now, because we are completely volunteer based at this point, we had to really go for the low hanging fruits of people who want to be proactive in this. I would say we're still in more of the foundational work.
So because our interview club or ends after 30 minutes, I wanted to give you a closing question. You can just discuss any further initiatives you're excited to work on, any future goals for Avid. So um, how exactly does Avid plan to progress in the future, and how can individuals and organizations contribute to that change?
Sure. What I'm most excited about Avid is if you look at our classroom lesson plan that we're actually creating this summer, we had one last year. It's not just about Asian American history. It's about how is our history connected to others. There's a very exciting one-sheeter that we have. Every first grader in Georgia have to learn about a character named Ruby Bridges. She is like one of the biggest figures when you think about Brown versus Board of Education, school desegregation in Georgia. And in our one-sheeter, we talk about Mammy Tate, a Chinese American girl who had to go through school desegregation through the court system, Alice Piper, a Paiute Native American girl, as well as Sylvia Mendez, a Mexican Puerto Rican American girl. So we have to talk about all of these perspectives and how are they related and how did one thing lead to the other. So what I'm most excited about Avid's work is, and also for the future, is it's not just Asian American, it's how our perspective in this big picture of comprehensive history and how does that build power for our students so that they know they can make changes. And we're hoping, and we're actually planning for the next year to create a youth forum in the summer where we bring students of color, Latinx students, Asian American students, Black students, and hopefully Indigenous community, which isn't very established in Georgia, but bring them, and also queer students together so that they learn their histories and also how we're related, our stories, and to build power within those students. So I'm most excited about that. And to learn more about us, go on our website. Heritage Month Kit is free online. We have it all on there. It's a great guide. Click on it, share it. We're going to continue it on. And just email us and contact us and sign up for a newsletter because we have opportunities for everyone.
Thank you so much, Weonhee. I know that I was so inspired hearing your story and just the plans that you have for the future and the change you want to enact. And I know that the students who are watching this video are very excited that you answered their questions and that you are putting so much positive change into the educational curriculums of the United States. So thank you so much for this interview, and for everyone watching. Weonhee is the Executive Director of Asian Voices for Education, and I highly encourage you to check out their website and all of their media that's out right now.